What if I told you that a single miscommunication almost triggered a war, a shooting incident on the high seas involving the Russian Navy and British fishermen that could have changed the course of history? October 21st, 1904. The calm waters of the North Sea turned into a battlefield. A Russian fleet mistaken the British fishing trawlers for enemy ships, and in that moment, the world was on the brink of disaster. But here's the twist. Was it an honest mistake, or was something much bigger at play here? Could this small incident have ignited a massive international conflict? Stay with me, because the Dogger Bank incident could have changed everything. It was a cold, misty morning on October 21st, 1904. The North Sea was peaceful, with a handful of British fishing trawlers scattered across the horizon. These fishermen had no idea that they were sailing into one of the most dangerous situations they would ever encounter. The British trawlers, like the Catherine, were simply doing their daily work, casting nets and preparing for their haul. The sea was quiet, almost eerily calm. But beneath the surface, tensions were rising between the great powers of Europe, particularly Russia and Japan. Far from the trawlers, the Russian Navy was patrolling the waters, monitoring their fleet's movements in the ongoing Russo-Japanese war. Russian ships were on high alert, navigating the treacherous waters while trying to avoid enemy forces. Suddenly, the Russian fleet's lookouts spotted what they thought were enemy ships in the distance. They were under orders to remain on high alert. The trawlers, nothing more than humble fishing boats, were mistaken for Japanese destroyers. In the fog of war, there's little room for mistakes, and on that day, a tragic error was about to unfold. The Russian fleet opened fire on the British trawlers, thinking they were Japanese warships. The first shot rang out, followed by more. The fishermen, unarmed and vulnerable, were caught completely off guard. Imagine the fear these fishermen must have felt. Out of nowhere, gunfire, explosions, and the looming threat of death. But why were they attacked? What made the Russians so certain? The fishermen, trying desperately to defend themselves, fired back with what little they had, small arms and desperate resolve. It was clear the Russian Navy was not expecting any resistance, and the situation escalated quickly. But the damage had already been done. The Russians, realizing they had made a mistake, quickly ceased fire. The fishing boats, however, were not so fortunate. One was severely damaged and several crew members were injured. What happened next would send shockwaves through international waters. The British government, furious over the attack, demanded an explanation from the Russian Empire. At the same time, the Russian officials insisted it was a tragic misunderstanding, an unfortunate mistake made in the heat of the moment. Could this really be just a mistake, a miscommunication between two nations on the brink of war? Or was something more sinister at play? The British, despite their anger, decided to hold off on immediate retaliation. Cooler heads prevailed, and war was narrowly avoided. But the damage to the diplomatic relationship between the two powers was already done. The incident sparked a wave of diplomatic negotiations, and for a brief moment, the world feared the start of a new conflict. Was this a mistake? A tragic miscommunication between two naval forces caught up in the chaos of the Russo-Japanese war? Or was there something more to the story? Some argue it was just the fog of war, a simple error. But could it have been something else? Did the Russians think they were under attack by the British? Or was it an intentional move to provoke a conflict? Even to this day, the incident remains a mystery. Did the Russian commanders know exactly what they were doing? Or was it all just a terrible misunderstanding? What would have happened if the situation had escalated further? We may never know. This was the story of the Dogger Bank incident, a misunderstanding that almost led the world to war. But did you know there was another case where a mysterious killer kept an entire city in fear? If you want to know more, check out my next video, The Mysterious Case of Dr. Satan. The link is on the screen. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe.